The sound of Rowan Montgomery's laughter echoed off the mahogany walls of the Chicago Superior Court. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was cruel, cold, and confident, the sound of a man who thought he had just crushed an insect. He looked across the aisle at his trembling wife, Alicia, and whispered loud enough for the gallery to hear, "You're finally nothing." Beside him, his mistress smirked, checking her watch. But then, the gavel banged. Once, twice, shattering the arrogance in the room. Judge Harrison didn't look amused. He picked up a sealed red envelope, adjusted his glasses, and stared dead at Rowan. "Mr. Montgomery," the judge said, his voice dangerously low. "You seem to be under a fatal misapprehension regarding who, exactly, signs your paychecks." In the next 5 minutes, the laughter died, replaced by a silence so heavy you could hear a life shatter. This is the story of how Alicia Montgomery didn't just win a divorce, she bought the courtroom. The sprawling penthouse on the 45th floor of the Legacy Tower overlooking Lake Michigan was silent, save for the rhythmic tapping of rain against the floor-to-ceiling glass. It was a cold Tuesday in November, the kind that bites through your coat and settles in your bones. Alicia Montgomery sat on the edge of the oversized Italian leather sofa, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She was 34, with striking features that were often hidden behind modesty, chestnut hair usually tied back, and clothes that were expensive, but intentionally unnoticeable. She had spent the last 7 years making herself smaller so that her husband, Rowan, could feel bigger. Rowan Montgomery was the CEO of Montgomery Tech Solutions, a logistics firm that had skyrocketed in value over the last 5 years. He was the golden boy of Chicago business, handsome, charismatic, and ruthlessly ambitious. And tonight, he was late. Again. The clock on the mantel chimed midnight. The elevator doors hissed open. Alicia didn't look up as Rowan strode in. He brought the smell of the city with him. Cold air, expensive scotch, and a perfume that wasn't hers. It was floral, aggressive, jasmine and ambition, Alicia thought. "You're still up," Rowan said, tossing his briefcase onto the armchair. He didn't look at her. He went straight to the bar cart and poured himself a drink, his back turned to his wife. "It's our anniversary, Rowan," Alicia said softly. Her voice was steady, lacking the shrillness he often accused her of. Rowan paused, the crystal decanter hovering over the glass. He let out a sigh, a sound of pure exhaustion mixed with irritation. He took a sip, turned around, and leaned against the counter. He looked at her, not with love or even anger, but with boredom. "Right," he said. 7 years. The 7-year itch, isn't that what they call it? "Is that what this is?" Alicia asked, finally meeting his eyes. "An itch?" Rowan chuckled darkly. He reached into the inside pocket of his tailored suit jacket. But instead of a jewelry box, he pulled out a thick, folded document. He walked over to the coffee table and dropped it in front of her. The heavy thud it made on the glass surface felt like a gunshot. "It's not an itch, Alicia. It's a correction." Alicia looked down. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She just stared at the bold black letters. "You're leaving me." "I'm upgrading," Rowan corrected, his cruelty casual, as if he were discussing a car lease. "Let's be honest, Elle. You were fine when I was a mid-level manager. You were sweet, supportive. But look at me now. I run this city's logistics. I need a partner who shines, not one who blends into the wallpaper." "Chloe shines, does she?" Alicia asked. Rowan froze for a split second, his eyes narrowing. "You know about Chloe?" "The marketing director you hired 6 months ago? The one who wears red to board meetings and laughs too loud at your jokes?" "Yes, Rowan." "I know." Rowan shrugged, regaining his composure. Smart girl. She understands power. She understands what a man like me needs. Look, Alicia, I'm not going to be a monster about this. The prenup is ironclad. You know that. You leave with what you came with, which is essentially nothing. But, he paused, trying to sound benevolent, I'll give you the condo in the suburbs, the old one, and a year's stipend, enough to get a job, maybe go back to whatever it was you did before. Painting? I was an actuary, Rowan. A risk assessor. Right. Boring stuff. That's why we worked, I suppose. You managed the boring, I managed the brilliance. He finished his drink in one gulp. My lawyer is Richard Sterling. You've heard of him? Alicia felt a cold chill. Richard Sterling was known as the Shark of Chicago. He didn't just win divorces, he annihilated the opposition. He was famous for burying spouses in legal fees and emotional ruin until they signed away their dignity for a bus ticket out of town. I've heard of him, Alicia whispered. Good. He'll be in touch tomorrow. I've already packed a bag. I'm staying at the Four Seasons until you move out. I want you out by the weekend, Alicia. Chloe wants to redecorate before the Christmas gala. The sheer audacity took her breath away. He was kicking her out of her own home, a home she had curated, a life she had built, so his mistress could pick out curtains for a party. Rowan walked to the door, grabbing his suitcase which, Alicia realized, had been waiting in the hallway all along. He stopped at the elevator and looked back at her. Don't fight this, Elle, he warned, a smirk playing on his lips. You're a nice woman. Don't try to play in the big leagues. You'll only get hurt. The elevator doors closed, sealing him away. Alicia sat in the silence of the penthouse. For 10 minutes, she didn't move. She listened to the rain. Then, slowly, she reached for the divorce papers. She flipped through them. He was offering her 50,000 Gulden and a beat-up condo in Schaumburg. In exchange, he kept the penthouse, the cars, the accounts, and 100% of his shares in Montgomery Tech Solutions. She turned to the last page where his signature was already scrawled in confident blue ink. Alicia stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the glittering skyline of Chicago. Rowan thought she was a housewife. He thought she was a risk assessor who had quit to support him. He thought she was weak. She walked to the bookshelf in the study, pulled out a copy of The Count of Monte Cristo, and opened the hollowed-out center. Inside lay a burner phone and a small black ledger. She dialed a number that hadn't been called in 7 years. It rang twice. A voice, deep and gravelly, answered. This line is for emergencies only, Miss Vance. Hello, Silas, Alicia said, her voice changing. The softness was gone, replaced by a steeliness that would have terrified Rowan if he had been there to hear it. It's not Miss Vance anymore. Not for long. What do you need? The voice asked. Rowan filed. He's using Richard Sterling. A low chuckle came from the other end of the line. Sterling. He's a loud dog. He barks at cars. I want to activate the protocol, Silas. The sleeping giant protocol. There was a pause on the line. Are you sure, Alicia? Once we pull that thread, the whole sweater unravels. He will be destroyed. Not just divorced. Destroyed. Alicia looked at the empty spot on the sofa where Rowan had sat, remembering the look in his eyes when he said she was dead weight. He wanted an upgrade, Silas, she said coldly. I think it's time he learned that he never actually owned the company he thinks he runs. Very well, Silas said. I'll see you in the morning. Wear black. The offices of Sterling and Associates were designed to intimidate. Located on the top floor of the Willis Tower, everything was glass, chrome, and aggressive modern art. Rowan sat in a leather chair that cost more than most people's cars, looking out at the city he felt he owned. Across from him, sat Richard Sterling. Sterling was a man of 50, with silver hair slicked back, a tan that came from a bottle, and teeth that were blindingly white. "You served her last night?" Sterling asked, tapping a gold pen against his desk. "I did," Rowan said, leaning back, relaxed. "She took it about as well as I expected. Quiet, shocked. She's probably packing her bags right now. And the assets? Hidden," Rowan smiled. "We moved the liquid cash to the shell accounts in the Caymans last week, just as you instructed. On paper, Montgomery Tech is operating at a thin margin. My salary looks modest. The bonuses are deferred until next quarter. After the divorce is final, she'll get a percentage of nothing." Sterling laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "Perfect. The poor man strategy. Classic. And she has no idea about the real valuation of the logistics contracts." "Alicia?" Rowan scoffed. "She doesn't read the financial news. She reads romance novels and paints watercolors. She thinks an IPO is a type of beer. She has no idea I'm closing a deal with Amazon next month that will triple the stock price." "Good," Sterling said. "We need to push for a quick settlement. We'll offer a slight bump in the stipend, maybe $75,000 instead of $50,000. Make it look like we're being generous. She'll sign just to make the pain stop. Who is she hiring? Some strip mall lawyer?" "She hasn't said yet. Probably someone from the Yellow Pages." At that exact moment, across town, in a building that was the polar opposite of Sterling's glass tower, Alicia was walking into an office. The building was a brownstone on the Gold Coast. No sign outside, just a heavy oak door with a brass knocker. This was the office of Silas Thorne. Silas Thorne didn't advertise. He didn't have a website. If you knew Silas Thorne, it was because you had old money or dangerous problems. He was a man of 60, heavy-set, wearing a three-piece tweed suit that looked like it was from 1920. He smoked a pipe, despite the city ordinances. Alicia walked in. She was wearing a black trench coat and sunglasses. She looked like a widow in mourning. "Coffee?" Silas asked, not looking up from a file on his desk. "Black," Alicia replied, sitting down. Silas poured a cup from a silver pot and slid it to her. Then he opened the file. "I've reviewed the petition. Sterling is sloppy. He's aggressive, which makes him predictable." "He wants me out of the penthouse by Saturday," Alicia said. "Legally he can't do that," Silas grunted. "But strategically we let him. We let him feel like he's winning. We let him move the mistress in. We let him think you are weak." "That won't be hard. That's all he's seen for 7 years." Silas looked at her over his spectacles. "Why did you wait this long, Alicia?" "The board has been asking about you. The Vance Trust has been dormant." Alicia took a sip of the bitter coffee. "I loved him, Silas. I really did. I thought if I supported him, if I used my connections quietly to open doors for him, he would succeed, and we would be happy. I hid who I was, because I didn't want him to feel inferior. I didn't want him to be Mr. Vance. I wanted him to be Rowan Montgomery." "And you made him," Silas noted. "You realize that, don't you? The initial capital for Montgomery Tech, the anonymous angel investor in 2018? That was you. He thinks it was a venture capital firm from Singapore. And the contract with the city of Chicago, the one that saved his company from bankruptcy 2 years ago." "I called the mayor," Alicia admitted. "He owed my father a favor." Silas closed the file. "So, Rowan Montgomery is a self-made man who was actually made by his wife, whom he is now discarding, for a 24-year-old marketing assistant. Correct. And now he wants to leave you with nothing." "He can keep the furniture, Silas," Alicia said, her eyes hardening. "But I want the company. I want his reputation, and I want him to know exactly who did it." Silas smiled. It was a rare, terrifying expression. "Then we don't file a standard response. We file a countersuit. But we seal the evidence until the hearing. We let Sterling think we are disorganized. We let them walk into the courtroom thinking they are fighting a kitten, only to find a tiger." "One more thing," Alicia said. "I need you to look into Chloe St. James." "Already done." Silas slid a thin manila envelope across the desk. "She's not just a mistress, Alicia. She's a corporate spy. She was planted at Montgomery Tech by their biggest rival, Helix Logistics. She's been feeding them data for months. Rowan is so blinded by lust, he doesn't realize she's stripping the copper out of the walls." Alicia's eyes widened. "He's losing the company anyway. If we do nothing, Helix buys him out for pennies on the dollar in 6 months. If we intervene, you take the company, and Rowan is left with nothing but his ego." Alicia stood up. She took the envelope. "Let's intervene. But let's make it a show. He likes an audience." 2 weeks later. The first hearing. The courtroom was packed. Divorce cases usually didn't draw a crowd, but Rowan Montgomery was a public figure, and Richard Sterling ensured the press was there. He wanted a public victory to boost his client's stock price. Rowan sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing a $3,000 suit, looking relaxed. Chloe was in the gallery, wearing oversized sunglasses, looking like she was at a fashion show. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Harrison entered. He was an older man, known for having zero patience for theatrics. He sat down and looked at the docket. "Montgomery versus Montgomery. Mr. Sterling, you may proceed." Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, this is a simple case. We have a prenuptial agreement. My client, Mr. Montgomery, has built a business empire solely through his own hard work. The respondent, Mrs. Montgomery, has contributed nothing to the marital assets. We are asking for the enforcement of the prenup and an immediate dissolution." The judge looked at the defense table. Alicia sat there alone. The chair next to her was empty. Rowan leaned over to Sterling and whispered, laughing, "She didn't even hire a lawyer. She's going to represent herself. This is going to be a slaughter." Sterling smirked. "Your Honor, since the respondent is unrepresented." "I am not unrepresented," Alicia said. Her voice was clear, projecting to the back of the room. The heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a loud creak. Heads turned. The silence of the room was broken by the heavy, rhythmic thud of a cane. Click, thud, click, thud. Silas Thorne walked down the center aisle. He wasn't rushing. He looked like a storm cloud moving across a prairie. He carried a battered leather briefcase that looked like it had survived a war. Sterling's smile faltered. He knew every high-end divorce lawyer in Chicago. He didn't know this man, but he knew the type. This was an old-school predator. Silas reached the defense table, placed his briefcase down, and looked at the judge. "Silas Thorne," he rumbled, his voice filling the room without a microphone. "Representing Mrs. Alicia Vance Montgomery." The judge's eyebrows shot up. "Thorne, I haven't seen you in my courtroom in 10 years?" "I've been semi-retired, Your Honor," Silas said, glaring at Rowan. "But some injustices require special attention," Rowan whispered to Sterling. "Who is this dinosaur?" "I don't know," Sterling hissed back, looking uneasy. "But check the name he used. Vance. Why did he call her Vance?" "That's her maiden name. Her dad was some nobody artist." Silas turned to face Rowan. He didn't smile. He simply opened his briefcase and pulled out a single blue document. "Your Honor," Silas said. "The defense moves to dismiss the prenuptial agreement on the grounds of fraud. Furthermore, We are filing a motion for immediate freezing of all assets held by Montgomery Tech Solutions pending a forensic audit." "On what grounds?" Sterling shouted, jumping up. "This is a fishing expedition." "On the grounds," Silas said calmly, "that Mr. Montgomery does not actually own the majority shares of his company. He merely holds them by proxy, and the owner of the proxy is sitting right next to me." Rowan let out a loud, incredulous laugh. He couldn't help it. It bubbled up from his arrogance. "She owns the company? She can't even balance a checkbook. This is a joke." He pointed a finger at Alicia. "You're pathetic, Alicia. Making up lies." The judge banged the gavel. "Mr. Montgomery, control yourself." But the seed of doubt had been planted. Sterling wasn't laughing. He was staring at Alicia, really looking at her for the first time. And he saw something that terrified him. She wasn't looking at the floor anymore. She was looking at Rowan with a look of absolute, terrifying pity. "The show is just starting, Rowan," Alicia whispered. The ride back to the office was silent. But it was a silence that screamed. Richard Sterling sat in the back of his town car, furiously typing on his tablet. Rowan Montgomery sat next to him, looking out the window, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle feathered in his cheek. "She's bluffing," Rowan said for the third time. "It's a delay tactic. She wants to freeze my assets so I can't buy the new condo for Chloe. It's petty. That's all Alicia is. Petty." Sterling didn't answer. He was currently accessing a private investigator database that charged $500 a minute. He typed in, "Alicia Vance." "Rowan," Sterling said, his voice tight. "You said her father was an artist?" "Yeah, a painter. Did landscapes. Died broke." "Why?" "Because," Sterling said, turning the tablet screen toward Rowan. "I'm looking at the probate records for an Arthur Vance, who died 7 years ago in Chicago. Did he paint?" "Sure." He also owned the patent for the algorithmic trading software used by half of the New York Stock Exchange. Rowan frowned. "What? No, that's impossible. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment when we met. She drove a Honda Civic." "Rich people stay rich by acting poor, Rowan," Sterling snapped, losing his cool. Arthur Vance was known as the ghost of the Board of Trade. He was a recluse. He hated publicity. When he died, his estate didn't go to a bank. It went to a private trust, the Vance Trust. Sterling swiped the screen. And the trustee? Silas Thorne. Rowan felt a prickle of unease, but his arrogance was a thick shield. "So she has some inheritance money. Good. That means I don't have to pay her alimony. We can argue she has sufficient means." "You aren't listening." Sterling slammed the tablet shut. "If the Vance Trust holds the proxy shares to Montgomery Tech, it means she was the angel investor. The Singapore group you thought funded your startup? It was her." "That's ridiculous," Rowan laughed, though the sound was brittle. "Alicia doesn't know the first thing about logistics. She made me sandwiches while I coded the first platform." "Then we need to prove it," Sterling said, pulling out his phone. "But until we do, the judge froze everything. Your accounts, the company accounts, the offshore shells. Everything is locked down until the audit is complete." The next morning, the reality of the situation hit Rowan like a freight train. He walked into the lobby of Montgomery Tech at 8 a.m., ready to fire someone to make himself feel better. He swiped his security badge at the turnstile. Beep. Access denied. He frowned and swiped again. Beep. Access denied. The security guard, a man named Jerry, whom Rowan had ignored for 5 years, looked up from his desk. "Mr. Montgomery, there's a flag on your ID." "It's a glitch, Jerry." "Open the gate," Rowan commanded. "I can't, sir. System lockdown. Protocol Sleeping Giant. Rowan froze. That name. Alisha had mentioned it. Suddenly, the elevator doors opened, and a team of 6 people walked out. They weren't employees. They wore grey suits and carried bankers' boxes. Leading them was a woman with sharp glasses and a clipboard. "Mr. Montgomery," she asked. "I'm Agent Kinsley from the forensic accounting firm appointed by Judge Harrison. We're securing the server room." "This is my company," Rowan shouted, his face turning red. The employees in the lobby stopped to watch. The great Rowan Montgomery, locked out of his own building. "Actually, sir," Agent Kinsley said, consulting her clipboard, "according to the temporary restraining order filed by the majority shareholder, you are placed on administrative leave pending the investigation into embezzlement." "Embezzlement!" Rowan screamed. "I moved my money." "You moved company assets to a personal account in the Caymans," Kinsley corrected. "Technically that's theft. Please escort Mr. Montgomery off the premises." Jerry, the security guard, stood up. He was a big man. He looked at Rowan, then at the gate. "I'm sorry, Mr. Montgomery. You have to leave." Rowan looked around. He saw Chloe standing near the reception desk. She was holding a box of her personal items. She looked terrified. She didn't look at him. She was furiously texting on her phone. "Chloe!" Rowan called out. She flinched. She looked at him, then at the forensic accountants, and then she turned her back on him and walked toward the side exit. Rowan was escorted out to the sidewalk. It was raining again. He stood there, wet and furious, while his employees watched from the glass windows above. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Alisha. "I hope you brought an umbrella. I cancelled the corporate car service." Rowan stormed into the old condo in Schaumburg an hour later. He had to take an Uber because his Tesla had been remotely disabled by the leasing company, another bill paid by the company account that was now frozen. He banged on the door. "Alisha, open this door." The door opened, but it wasn't Alisha. It was a man in a black suit. Private security. He crossed his arms. "Mr. Montgomery, you are not permitted within 50 feet of Mrs. Vance Montgomery. This is my house." "Actually," Alisha's voice came from behind the guard, "it's mine. I bought it with my first paycheck as an actuary. Check the deed." The guard stepped aside, revealing Alisha. She was sitting at the kitchen table, painting. She looked serene. She was wearing a silk robe that cost more than the suit Rowan was wearing. "What do you want, Rowan?" she asked, dipping her brush in water. "Stop this," Rowan pleaded, changing tactics. He walked in, ignoring the guard. "Okay, you made your point. You're smart. You have money. I respect that. Let's make a deal. Stop the audit. Unfreeze the accounts. I'll give you 20% of the company." Alisha laughed. It was a genuine, amused laugh. 20%? Rowan, I own 85%. You can't run it without me. I'm the face of Montgomery Tech. You're the face, Alisha agreed. But I'm the brain. Who do you think wrote the code for the logistics algorithm, Rowan? You? I supervised it. You slept on the couch while I wrote it, Alisha said calmly. I wrote the code. I created the shell company in Singapore to fund you because I knew your ego couldn't handle taking money from your wife. I built you, brick by brick. She stood up and walked over to him. She was shorter than him, but in that moment, she loomed over him. "And now," she whispered, "I'm going to take it all back. Not because you cheated, Rowan. Men cheat. It's a cliché. I'm taking it back because you laughed. You laughed at me in that courtroom. You thought I was nothing." "Alisha, baby." Rowan reached for her hand. "I love you. I was confused. Chloe meant nothing." Alisha pulled her hand away as if he were burning her. "Chloe is a spy for Helix Logistics. She's been recording your conversations for months." Rowan went pale. What? Silas found the wire transfers. She's not just your mistress, Rowan. She's your executioner, and you were too busy looking in the mirror to notice. Alicia signaled to the guard. Get him out of here. I have a company to run. The week following the lockout was a slow-motion car crash for Rowan Montgomery. Without access to the company funds, his lifestyle evaporated overnight. The Four Seasons asked him to leave when his credit card was declined. He ended up sleeping on Richard Sterling's sofa in his guest house, a humiliation that Sterling made sure to mention every morning over coffee. But the real nightmare was the deposition. Depositions are usually boring affairs held in conference rooms with stale donuts. Silas Thorne, however, rented a ballroom at the Palmer House Hotel. He claimed he needed the space for the evidence. Rowan sat at a long table next to Sterling. Across from them sat Alicia, looking impeccable in a Navy power suit, and Silas, who looked like a bear about to eat a salmon. A videographer was recording everything. State your name for the record, Silas rumbled. Rowan Montgomery. Mr. Montgomery, let's talk about the Genesis Code, the foundational algorithm of your company. Can you explain to me how the recursive sorting function works? Rowan shifted in his seat. I'm the CEO. I don't deal with the granular code anymore. But you wrote it in 2018. Yes. Silas pulled a document from a stack that was 2 feet high. Exhibit A chat log from a developer forum dated August 2018. User handle Artvance, asking for help with the recursive sorting function. The code posted is identical to the Genesis code. Silas looked over his glasses. Artvance. That was your wife's father's handle. But since he was dead, who was using it? I don't know, Rowan muttered. Alicia Vance was using it, Silas said. We have the IP logs. She wrote the code, Rowan. You just put your name on the copyright application. That's perjury and fraud. Sterling intervened. Objection. Relevance? The relevance, Silas said, leaning forward, is that if Mr. Montgomery fraudulently claimed ownership of the IP, his employment contract is void, and his shares are forfeit. Rowan slammed his hand on the table. This is a witch hunt. What about the business? I brought in the Amazon deal. Ah, yes, the Amazon deal, Silas smiled, a predatory smile. Exhibit B. He slid a glossy photo across the table. It showed Rowan at a dinner table in a dimly lit restaurant. He was holding hands with Chloe St. James. Sitting across from them was the VP of Operations for Helix Logistics, Montgomery Tech's biggest rival. This photo was taken 3 days ago, Silas said. After the freezing order, you were trying to sell the client list to Helix, weren't you, Rowan? To get some quick cash. Rowan froze. He looked at Sterling. Sterling looked away, disgusted. I was just having dinner. We have the audio, Rowan. Silas tapped a small USB drive. Chloe was wearing a wire, but not for Helix this time, for us. The colour drained from Rowan's face. Chloe? Ms. St. James realised that sticking with you was a bad career move. Alicia spoke up for the first time. Her voice was cool, detached. We offered her immunity from prosecution for corporate espionage if she cooperated. She chose not to go to prison. She gave us everything, Rowan. The emails, the texts, the recordings of you calling the judge a senile old bat. Rowan slumped in his chair. He felt the walls closing in. The room felt hot. You can't use that, Rowan stammered. Spousal privilege? Attorney-client? Something? She's not your spouse, Rowan, Silas reminded him gently. And she's certainly not your lawyer. She's just the woman you destroyed your marriage for. Silas stood up and walked to the window. Here is the offer, Rowan. It's a one-time offer. It expires in 10 minutes. He turned around. You will sign a full confession regarding the IP theft. You will resign as CEO immediately. You will transfer your remaining 15% of the shares to Alicia Vance as repayment for the funds you embezzled. And if I don't? Rowan whispered. If you don't, Silas pointed to the door. 2 FBI agents are waiting in the hallway. Corporate fraud, embezzlement, perjury. You're looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Rowan looked at Alicia. He looked for any sign of the woman who used to rub his back when he was stressed, the woman who made him birthday cakes. He saw only a stranger, a powerful, beautiful stranger who had outgrown him. You planned this, Rowan said, his voice shaking. You planned this whole thing, the sleeping giant. You were waiting for me to slip up. I was waiting for you to be the man I thought you were, Alicia said softly. But you insisted on proving you were small. I didn't set a trap, Rowan. I just stopped protecting you from yourself. Rowan looked at the pen in front of him. His hand trembled as he picked it up. He looked at the confession. It was an end to his life. No more parties. No more magazine covers. Just shame. But the alternative was prison. He signed. Rowan walked out of the hotel room, a broken man. The FBI agents were there, but they let him pass. The deal had been struck. He walked out onto State Street. It was snowing now. He didn't have a coat. He checked his pockets. No phone, no wallet. He had left them on the table. He was a nobody. Back in the conference room, Sterling was packing his briefcase. He looked at Silas with a grudging respect. You play dirty, Thorne. I play to win, Silas grunted. Send the final decree over by morning. Sterling left. Alicia remained seated, looking at the signed document. It's over, she said quietly. Not quite, Silas said, sitting down and lighting his pipe, ignoring the hotel's smoke detector. We have the company back. We have the assets. But there is one loose end. Chloe? No. Helix Logistics. They have the data Chloe gave them before she flipped. They are going to use it to undercut Montgomery Tech's prices next week. They smell blood in the water. Alicia stood up, smoothing her skirt. The sadness was gone from her eyes, replaced by the sharp glint of intellect that had written the Genesis code. Let them try, Alicia said. They have the data from the blue server, right? Yes, Silas nodded. That's where Chloe had access. Alicia smiled. I anticipated a breach 6 months ago. I created a mirror server. The blue server contains dummy data, flawed logistics routes, incorrect shipping tariffs. If Helix uses that data to bid on contracts, they won't just lose money. They will bankrupt themselves within a quarter. Silas laughed, a deep belly laugh that shook the room. You are your father's daughter, Alicia. Remind me never to cross you. Get the car, Silas, Alicia said, walking toward the door. We have a board meeting to crash. The headquarters of Montgomery Tech was in chaos. The news of Rowan Montgomery's sudden resignation had hit the news wires at 6:00 a.m. By 8:00 a.m., the stock had dipped 12%. The employees were gathered in small, anxious clusters near the water coolers, whispering about subpoenas, FBI agents, and the rumor that the company was bankrupt. In the boardroom on the top floor, the remaining board of directors sat in a grim silence. These were men and women who had backed Rowan. They had enjoyed his charisma, his lavish dinners, and the rising stock prices. Now, they were looking at a power vacuum. We need to appoint an interim CEO immediately, said Jonathan Greaves, a man with a thick neck and a louder voice. He had been Rowan's golf buddy and closest ally on the board. I propose we bring in someone from the outside. Someone to stabilize the ship. We can't let the wife take the reins. She's a housewife, for God's sake. She owns the majority shares, Jonathan, another board member, a woman named Sarah, pointed out nervously. She holds the cards. She holds paper, Greaves slammed his fist on the table. She doesn't know how to run a billion-dollar logistics firm. She'll drive us into the ground in a week. We need to fight this. We can file a motion of incompetence. We can—" The heavy double doors swung open. Alicia Vance Montgomery walked in. She wasn't wearing the soft pastels she used to wear to company holiday parties. She was wearing a sharp, charcoal grey suit that looked like armor. Her hair was cut into a sleek, sharp bob. She didn't walk like a guest. She walked like the landlord. Behind her walked Silas Thorne, looking as ominous as a thunderstorm, and behind him a team of 4 young, intense-looking aides carrying laptops. "Good morning, gentlemen. Sarah," Alicia said, her voice cool and crisp. She walked to the head of the table, Rowan's old chair. She didn't sit. She stood behind it, resting her hands on the leather. "You can't be in here," Greaves blustered, standing up. "This is a closed session of the board." "Actually, Jonathan," Alicia said, not even looking at him as she opened a folder, "this is an emergency shareholder meeting, and as I hold 85% of the voting shares, I am the meeting." "This is preposterous," Greaves spat. "Alicia, be reasonable. We all know Rowan was difficult. But you? You're an actuary. You paint landscapes. You don't know the first thing about supply chain logistics." Alicia finally looked at him. Her eyes were like ice. "Sit down, Jonathan." "I will not," I said. "Sit down." The command cracked like a whip. Greaves, stunned by the sheer authority in her voice, sank back into his chair. Alicia signaled to one of her aides, who connected a laptop to the main projector. A complex diagram of the company's global shipping routes appeared on the screen. It was a mess of red and yellow lines. "This," Alicia said, gesturing to the screen, "is the current state of Montgomery Tech under Rowan's brilliant leadership. Inefficient. Bloated. He was routing 40% of our Asian shipments through a shell company in Macau to skim off the top. It was costing us $6 million a quarter in unnecessary tariffs." The board members murmured. They hadn't known. "And this," Alicia clicked a button. The lines on the screen shifted. They became streamlined, blue and green, flowing like water. "This is the Protocol V routing algorithm. I deployed it remotely 30 minutes ago. It bypasses the Macau bottleneck, renegotiates the fuel surcharge automatically with the carriers, and optimizes container space using AI." She looked around the room. "In the last half hour, I have saved this company $2 million. Does anyone else have questions about my competence?" Silence. Absolute silence. "Good," Alicia said, sitting down in the chair. "Now, on to the housekeeping. Jonathan, you're fired." Greaves's eyes bulged. "You can't fire me. I'm a board member. You were also the recipient of a consulting fee of $200,000 a year paid from Rowan's slush fund." Silas Thorne spoke up from the corner, holding up a bank statement. "We call that a bribe, Mr. Greaves. You can resign or we can call the SEC." Greaves turned pale. He grabbed his briefcase and stormed out without a word. "Anyone else?" Alicia asked the room. No one moved. "Excellent. Now, regarding the Helix threat," Alicia continued, shifting gears instantly. "They are going to launch their new platform on Monday. They believe they have our data. They believe they are going to undercut us." "They will," Sarah said, finding her voice. "If Chloe St. James gave them our pricing model, they can bid 10% lower on every contract. We'll lose the Amazon deal. We'll lose everything." Alicia smiled. It was a smile that made the board members shiver. "Let them bid," Alicia said softly. "I want them to win every single contract. In fact, I want us to pull back. Let Helix have the market for exactly 48 hours. "Are you insane?" another member asked. "Trust me," Alicia said. "By Wednesday, Helix won't just be our competitor. They will be a cautionary tale. The rest of the day was a bloodbath, but of a different kind. Alicia didn't fire the staff. She fired the sycophants. She walked through the departments, sales, IT, HR, and she knew names. She knew who was actually doing the work and who was just drinking Rowan's Kool-Aid. She stopped at the desk of the lead developer, a young man named Kenji, who looked terrified. "Kenji," Alicia said, "the sorting algorithm in the legacy code. Line 405. The recursive loop." Kenji looked up, confused. Yes? It's clumsy. Change it to a binary heap sort. It will reduce latency by 15%. Kenji's jaw dropped. How did you know that? Rowan said that code was proprietary magic. Rowan couldn't code a Hello World program if you gave him a manual, Alicia said, loud enough for the department to hear. I wrote the core, and now we're going to fix it. By 5 p.m., the mood in the building had shifted from fear to electricity. The Queen hadn't just returned. She had woken up the hive. They weren't working for a figurehead anymore. They were working for a visionary. Monday morning arrived with the tension of a bomb ticking down. The business world was watching. The Wall Street Journal had run a front-page story. The housewife CEO, can Alicia Vance save Montgomery Tech? Most analysts said no. At 9 a.m. sharp, Helix Logistics made their move. They announced exclusive contracts with 3 major retailers, undercutting Montgomery Tech's prices by a staggering 15%. They were using the confidential data Chloe St. James had stolen to target Rowan's most vulnerable clients. In the Helix war room, CEO Carter Banks popped a bottle of champagne. "We got them," he cheered, watching the stock ticker. "Montgomery is dead in the water. That woman doesn't know what hit her." Back at Montgomery Tech, the mood was terrifyingly calm. Alicia sat in her office, sipping tea, watching the live feed. Silas Thorne stood by the window, checking his watch. "They took the bait," Silas rumbled. "They swallowed the hook, the line, and the sinker," Alicia corrected coldly. "Explain it to me," Sarah, a nervous board member, pleaded. "They have our pricing. They are winning the contracts. How does this help us?" "They have the data from the blue server," Alicia said, her eyes locked on the screen. "I anticipated a breach 6 months ago. The data on that server wasn't just wrong, Sarah. It was poisonous." At 11:12 a.m., the trap sprung. Helix's automated dispatch system, fed by the stolen data, began to issue orders. But because the data was flawed, it sent trucks to warehouses that didn't exist. It routed perishable goods through roads closed for construction. But the real kill switch was the scheduling bug Alicia had embedded, a logic bomb. When Helix's system tried to scale up to handle the massive volume of stolen orders, the bomb triggered an infinite feedback loop. In the Helix offices, screens flickered and went black. Dispatch boards turned red. "Sir!" An aide screamed in Carter Banks's office. "The system is crashing. It's rewriting the database. It's deleting the backups." By 1 p.m., Helix Logistics wasn't just losing money. They were operationally brain-dead. Thousands of trucks were stranded across the Midwest. Millions of dollars of cargo were sitting in limbo. The retailers who had betrayed Montgomery Tech were now panicking. Alicia's phone began to ring. It was the VP of Operations for Amazon. "Mrs. Vance Montgomery." The voice was desperate. "Helix is melting down. We have packages piling up. Can you take the load back?" Alicia smiled. "We can take it back. But the rate has changed. It's a rush order now. Premium pricing." By 3 p.m., Montgomery Tech stock hadn't just recovered. It had surged to an all-time high. Alicia had destroyed her biggest competitor without firing a single shot. 3 days later, the dust had settled. Helix was facing bankruptcy. Alicia was working late when the intercom buzzed. "Miss Vance, a visitor. He has no appointment." "Let him in." Rowan walked in. He looked terrible, unshaven, his expensive suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. He looked around the office that used to be his, seeing the awards for innovation that she had already started to win. "I saw the news," Rowan said, his voice hoarse. "You destroyed Helix, the blue server. I never knew. 7 years, and I never knew you were a genius." "You saw what you wanted to see, Rowan. You wanted a trophy. So you treated me like one." He stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. "I made a mistake, Elle. I lost everything. The money, the reputation. Chloe left town the minute the check bounced. I'm broke. Sterling is suing me. Please, give me a job. Anything. I built this place too." Alicia looked at him. She remembered the nights she fixed his code while he slept. She remembered his cruel laughter in the courtroom. She opened her drawer and slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. "I anticipated this conversation." Rowan picked it up, hope flaring. Then he read it. His face fell. "Position: Assistant Night Manager. Location: Schaumburg Distribution Center, Warehouse B. Salary: $18.50. Hour: Is this a joke?" he whispered. "Warehouse B, that's where we store the returns. It's a dump." "It's a job," Alicia said, her voice like ice. "It's the only one available for someone with your skill set. You start Monday. Or you don't. I really don't care." Rowan stared at her. He wanted to scream, but he had no leverage. He folded the paper, put it in his pocket, and bowed his head. "Thank you." He walked out, a broken man. Silas stepped from the shadows. "That was cold." "It was necessary," Alicia replied. "Now call the lawyers. We bought Helix today for pennies on the dollar. It's time to rebrand." "What do we call the new company?" Silas asked. Alicia picked up a paintbrush, a small smile playing on her lips. "Nemesis," she said. 1 year later, the Schaumburg Distribution Center, formerly known as Warehouse B, was a cavernous, drafty building that smelled of diesel fumes and wet cardboard. Outside, the Illinois winter howled. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed with a headache-inducing hum. It was 3:00 a.m. Rowan Montgomery wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of a dirty glove. His lower back screamed in protest. He had spent the last 8 hours unloading pallets of heavy electronics. "Hey, Montgomery!" Kyle, the 20-year-old shift supervisor, shouted from a forklift. "Pick up the pace. We got 3 more trucks incoming. The holiday rush isn't going to wait for your bad back." "I'm moving, Kyle!" Rowan gritted out. He grabbed the next box on the belt and aimed his scanner. Beep! He looked down at the shipping label. It was a high-end gaming console, destined for a luxury condo in the Gold Coast. But Rowan wasn't looking at the address. He was staring at the logo, printed in sleek silver foil on the packing tape. It was a stylized image of a sword and shield. Rowan saw that logo everywhere. It was on the side of the trucks he unloaded. It was on the uniform he wore. It was on the paycheck that barely covered his rent in a studio apartment above a bowling alley. Every box he lifted added a fraction of a cent to her net worth. He walked to the break room for his 15-minute lunch, slumping into a plastic chair. On the wall, a small TV played the morning financial news. The anchor looked excited. And in our top story, Nemesis Systems has just surpassed FedEx to become the leading logistics provider in North America. We are joined live from the New York Stock Exchange by the CEO, Alicia Vance. Rowan stopped chewing. There she was. Alicia. She looked radiant in a white power suit, standing amidst the chaos of the trading floor. She looked 5 years younger than the woman he had divorced. "Ms. Vance," the reporter asked, "your company's rise has been unprecedented. A year ago, this firm was on the brink of collapse. What changed?" Alicia smiled at the camera. To Rowan, it felt like she was looking straight into the break room. "I learned the true definition of value," Alicia said, her voice smooth and captivating. "I learned that if you let someone else appraise your worth, you lose. But if you know your value, you can build an empire." "And the name?" the reporter pressed. "Nemesis. It sounds aggressive." Alicia laughed, the laugh of a conqueror. Nemesis was the Greek goddess of divine retribution against those who suffer from hubris, arrogance before the gods. I thought it was a fitting reminder to never let ego drive the car. "Man," Kyle said, shaking his head as he watched the screen. "She's a shark. I'd be terrified to cross her. Didn't her ex-husband try to screw her over or something?" Rowan stared at his sandwich. "Yeah," he whispered. "Something like that." "What an idiot!" Kyle laughed. "Imagine having a woman like that and thinking you could do better." Rowan tossed his unfinished lunch in the trash. "Break's over." 40 miles away, Alicia stood on the balcony of the penthouse she had bought back from the bank. She had gutted Rowan's dark mahogany decor, replacing it with light, air, and modern art. Silas Thorne sat on the white sofa, reviewing a tablet. "The Asian expansion is greenlit. You are officially running a global empire, Alicia." Alicia took a sip of champagne, looking out at the city lights. "Did you send the bonus checks?" "I did. Every employee at the Schaumburg warehouse got a Christmas bonus." Silas paused, looking over his glasses. "Even the assistant night manager." Alicia turned, a small smile playing on her lips. "Good. I hear the heating bills in those studio apartments are high this year." "You are cruel, Alicia." "No, Silas, I'm fair. He wanted to live a life without my help. I'm simply letting him experience it." She walked to the elevator. She had a meeting with the mayor about fixing the city's transit system. She wasn't the girl who painted watercolors anymore. Rowan had killed that girl. In her place stood a queen. The elevator doors closed, sealing her in her tower of glass and success. Down in the warehouse, Rowan scanned another box. Beep. The balance of the universe, once tilted by arrogance, was finally restored. And that is the story of how Alicia Vance turned her husband's betrayal into the ultimate revenge. Rowan thought he could discard her like trash, but he forgot the most important rule of business: never underestimate the silent partner. What did you think of Alicia's final move? Was making Rowan work in her warehouse too cruel, or was it the perfect punishment for his arrogance? Personally, I think renaming the company Nemesis was a stroke of genius. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want to hear more dramatic stories about betrayal and redemption, make sure to hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a video. I want to hear from you in the comments below. If you were Alicia, would you have hired Rowan back or let him hit rock bottom alone? Let me know. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply massive success. See you in the next story.